Good morning. We'd like to welcome you to the BlackUSA.News morning show, and we're here with the Chief of Equity for Baltimore City, Dana P. Moore. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. And it is a good morning today.
So what is the Chief Equity Officer? I've been waiting weeks to ask you.
Can I lead in with a little bit of story?
Come on with it.
As you know, I've practiced law in Baltimore City for decades, and my mother was the one that made sure that I went to law school. She actually drove me to Washington and Lee University Law School, and she said, "This is where you're going." And she has walked with me on the law path the entire time. When I called her in December and said, "Mom, I'm leaving the law department, and I am going to be the city's first ever chief equity officer." She's in her 80s, and she said, "What the hell is that?" She was like, "What are you talking about?" So I had to explain to her, and I've had to explain to others since then. Folks from Baltimore know that Baltimore's new mayor, Brandon Scott, has really campaigned on an equity platform. He's established and passed laws that assure that Baltimore is more equitable. When he won and took office, he called me and asked if I would be willing to be the director of the Office of Equity and Civil Rights, and then serve as the city's chief equity officer. I gave it some thought. Ultimately, I said, "Sure, let's do this." And so my mission really is to, one, make sure across the city enterprise, all of its boards, commissions, all of its agencies follow the equity laws that were passed, but also deliver services, make decisions, hire, promote with a sense of equity through an equity lens. So that's the first thing. The mayor has also charged me with being creative, thinking out of the box, finding new ways to assure that opportunities are available to everyone, that we start to correct some of the historic wrongs that still exist in Baltimore. For example, and you've talked about this, Donnie, and you know this, and I see you doing what you can in your world, in your ways, but we are the birthplace of redlining. Baltimore is still suffering from the artifacts of those very, very cruel decisions. So part of my mission is to find creative ways to address those ongoing concerns. He also charged me to be bold. And I see Mr. DeShiel is on. And
good morning.
Good morning. The mayor went on to say, it is okay to make people unhappy. It is okay to rock the boat, because you can't have change always with smiles and people agreeing. There's going to be resistance. So that's generally the mission. We're starting within, looking at the Office of Equity and Civil Rights and looking at how we do business ourselves. I think change starts at home. So we're starting there. I'm looking at, pay equity. Pay equity is very important to me. The second thing that we're doing, and it's already happening, and you and I have talked about it. I don't know that I've talked about it with Mr. DeShiel, but there is a deep dive happening right now, as we speak, at the city's backlog of payments. We owe, per contract, money to vendors that do and provide great services to the city. The city administrator, Christopher Shorter, has a list of all of the backlog of payments and is directing that agencies address those and that it happen expeditiously. So that's huge. And I'm hoping that companies will start seeing the benefits of that look and that decision to act. A lot of equity work is happening within agencies. I can tell you Department of Transportation, DPW, and planning have very robust equity plans. And so we've been talking about how to sort of spread some of that work across all of the agencies, really endorse and support and lift up what's already being done, and then move it forward. We will be, my chief administrative officer is a amazing woman by the name of Khadija Fairmond. She and I she's from Afghanistan, and she herself has an amazing story. She's a refugee, and she came to the law department through a very interesting process, and she and I have worked together closely for several years, and she decided to come with me to the Office of Equity and Civil Rights. So we are in the process of selecting vendors to deliver equity training. We're starting with training on implicit bias that will happen across all of the city eventually, but we're starting with agency directors, deputy directors, mid-level employees, but also procurement officers. Khadija and I are taking the training that the city offers. We're doing that now because we want to be sure that whatever we tell others to take, that we've taken it and we bless it. So the plan is to have someone live doing virtual training live, fresh for the city leadership. That will then move over to online self-directed training, and we'll conclude with, I believe it's Franklin Covey doing live training, again, virtual. So we're trying to educate all of our city agencies about the need to act more equitably, to understand what that means, how to achieve it, some simple rules for engagement, as we move forward. So I hope that answers your question.
Good deal. Mr. Bob, welcome to the show. Can you pull your head up a little bit? Turn your camera down. There you go. There you go.
I do that because I sometimes forget to put a shirt on. So, but fortunately, I did not this morning. So, good morning to everyone.
Good morning. We're so glad your brain is engaged and you remember to put your shirt on.
Any thoughts for the chief equity officer?
Well, let me start by saying that I think that the two of the most important words that we learn in the English language are please and thank you. Okay, that neither one cost anything.
Right.
Before I get to Dana, let me commend the city administrator on doing, I think, the most important thing he could ever do in that position, which is tell the people to service the customers, to smile that you can see over the phone, to say thank you, to show people that they are there to serve them, that they're anxious to serve them, and to be and not to get off the phone until they provide some help. When I saw his memo, when I saw Shorter's memo, who I haven't met yet, but I probably will soon. When I saw his memo to all the agency heads and departments and so forth, I applauded. We've been talking years about changing the culture in city government and making Baltimore a more friendly place.
What are you talking about, like going to the municipal building and paying your water bill and somebody coming to the counter and say, what you want?
Yeah. Instead of saying, good morning, sir, how can I help you? That's the difference. That attitude, and the reason I'm saying that first, because that transfers over into the vendor payment situation as well. Unfortunately, there has been a culture developed that somehow or another, by not paying bills on time that you know are owed, you're helping the city, you're saving money. It's a practice that nobody will admit it, but I assure you, it's a practice that agency heads have embraced for years as a way of showing that their budget has been balanced or that they have not misapplied funds. They simply hold it and not pay it when they know it's due. And frankly, I'm not saying that anybody has ever told anybody to do that, but you operate within a system where it appears to be encouraged because it appears to be rewarded in some fashion. The cost to the city over the years has been tremendous. I can tell you without a doubt that vendors who do business with the city, and many don't anymore because of late payment, by the way, city has lost tremendous amount of competition from competent and reliable companies who simply won't do business with Baltimore City anymore because they don't pay their bills on time, if ever. And then you've got a culture where if there's a dispute, it always begins with we're right and you're wrong until you prove otherwise. That's not an approach that engenders the appropriate kind of relationship between the people who provide the service and the people for whom the service is being provided.
Mm-hmm.
No one is right all the time, not even me. I confess. I confess that you'll never hear that admission again.
Yeah. Oh.
But you can't approach everything as though we are right. We, the city, are right, and we're going to maintain it until you prove that we are wrong. That's an attitude that's got to change. But it begins with those two simple words: please and thank you. Now, on the equity side, I'm happy to see that Dana is tackling this issue because I know she won't let it go until it's finished, which means I know she'll never let it go because it's never finished. It requires ongoing vigilance. It never ends. It's a process. It's not an event. It requires consistent monitoring because the relationships change when the people change. The culture is not something that people they acquire through. It's not through osmosis. It's not in the walls. It's not in the desk drawers that you pull out and get it. It's transferred from one person to another. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's a continuous process. So anyway, I applaud the city administrator and I applaud Dana for embarking upon a task that's long overdue, which is for the city to recognize that the people who provide services to it are not its enemies. Right. When the contracts are awarded, it's not a declaration of war. It's the initiation of a partnership, mm-hmm. where it only works if everybody wins. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So, Dana, any thoughts on making Baltimore more business friendly?
Sure, but I want to respond to Attorney DeShiel just real quickly. First of all, thank you very, very much for not just the kind words, but the hard words. You're speaking the truth. People have, almost everybody has responded really well to CA Shorter's memo, but it's long overdue. And the very last voicemail message that I picked up from my law department phone was an older woman who said she had called one of our departments and asked for some help, and she was denied the help and was told, well, that's not the law. And the woman said, well, can you send me the law? I really want to understand. And the person said, no, I cannot send you the law. And I mean, it broke my heart. I called her and I said, I am so sorry that happened to you. Should not have. She says, well, Ms. Moore, there's just some things government is supposed to do. You're supposed to call people back and you're supposed to help people. And I said, I totally agree. And, I've done everything I can to get her the law and get her the help. But, I'm not going to let her go because I feel like I want her treated the way I want my own mother treated.
Yeah. And
that's how we all have to act. On everything that you said about vendors and the vendor relationship, you are correct. We're supposed to be in partnership. Yeah. We're supposed to be in partnership. And we do that by respecting, first of all, the commitments that we make. We are under contract.
Yeah.
And that culture that you described, it must change. It will change. There's plenty that we can do to make sure that happens, and we will do it. And I hear you. I've always paid attention to you, Mr. DeShiel, always. and so I really hear you, and I thank you.
I appreciate the respect. Thank you.
Oh, Yes. We don't always agree, but I always listen. Yes.
I appreciate that as well.
Yeah. So more opportunity. The one thing, well, there's a lot of things that we need to do. And I think I talked about this earlier. I am hyper focused on an executive order that will do for Baltimore what was done in Denver, Colorado. And it was accomplished through an executive order, which required those applying and vying to do business with the city to set forth their own equity initiatives, their own DEI plan. How are the companies that we hope to do business with carrying out and affirming equity initiatives within their own business? And that we would score for that and give recognition for that. I think it's a small thing that we can do, but it would have a big impact because it would let our vendors know that this is important to us. And if they want to do business with Baltimore, they too need to recognize the need for change and equity. So that's one thing. This really started, or it just came to my awareness during the Pugh administration. We would review what was on the agenda for the upcoming Board of Estimates. Mayor Pugh would always ask, can this contract be broken down? For the really mega huge contracts, that question would be asked. And I know that Mayor Young would do the same thing. And I know that Mayor Scott is also focusing on that. But it needs to be part of the cadence that happens within the agency. It really should not wait until a matter comes onto the Board of Estimates agenda and the question gets asked by the mayor. We need to back up and ask those questions at the agency level, at the the procurement officer level, so that when things do get to the Board of Estimates, that work is done. And we don't have to delay or send back for a second review. That's again, I'm looking at things that we can do right now that cost us zero. Please, thank you, don't cost anything. It costs us nothing to do the executive order that I talked about, and it costs us nothing to break apart our large contracts. Yeah, thank you, Michael Haney. I got it. He's sitting. Ooh, I get distracted with the email, with the inboxing, but I received it. Thank you very, very much. So those are two things that we can do. There's a lot of talk about how we do, the percentages and how we manage our database for minority women and local vendors. One of the things that's happening it's happening now, it's not publicized, but the new chief of data equity, I believe it's the chief of data equity, is looking at how to right now revise the database for minority women vendors. We have a fairly good database, but we lost a lot of data during the ransomware attack. Things got backlogged. There's things that can be done to make that database more robust. So that's happening. So those are three things that cost us nothing.
Yeah, I have two recommendations. One that I've made before, and one that may be particularly new. The first is, I think the Board of Estimates ought to hire a procurement advisor. Let me tell you what the procurement advisor would do. The procurement advisor, which would be someone who is experienced and expert in procurement and government procurement, the procurement advisor would review all recommendations for contract awards before they go to the Board of Estimates. And the procurement advisor would make a recommendation independent of the agency that's recommending the award. And that's the problem. You see, when the board gets a recommendation, it's coming from the agency that's already made a decision. And so the members of the board in most cases receive only a briefing the week before or a few days before, they have to make a decision on the award. And quite frankly, no member of the board can be expert in everything that comes before the board. So particularly as it relates to the procurement issue. So you need, I think, an independent procurement advisor to stand as a go-between between the agencies who are already locked into their decision and the members of the board who have to make a decision in many cases that on issues that challenge the decisions that have been made by the agency. That's one thing. Secondly, actually, I lost my thought thinking about that. Oh, the city contracts are awarded, and I'm talking about the contracts that are required to be competitively bid now. I'm not talking about professional services, but the contracts, the charter says contracts are awarded to the lowest responsible and responsive bidder. Neither of those terms is defined in the charter. Responsibility is an area where there's great latitude to determine what are the conditions of responsibility. We have examples of all around. The MBE program is an adjunct to the responsibility issue.
I agree.
Because, so we can do things. The city can fully exercise the tremendous discretion it has, given the fact that responsibility isn't defined, to redefine what a responsible bidder is. A responsible bidder is one who both in their public and their private work utilizes minority firms to the maximum extent possible. Certified minority firms in the city of Baltimore to the maximum extent possible. That's one way of doing it, and there are many other ways. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, isn't there case law that helps us define what constitutes a responsible bidder?
There are plenty of cases that do give a definition of what a responsible bidder is, and essentially it's somebody who you trust to do what they say they're going to do. But
okay, that's not good enough.
No. But there are other components of it.
Right.
Other components of it, and the definition is as broad as the term appears on its face. It changes from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Basically, it's any matter that's reasonably and rationally related to a valid decision on the capability of the firm to deliver the service or the goods that have been promised. Whereas responsiveness, of course, is just that. That just says, are they? If we ask for apples, are they offering apples? Or are they offering oranges? That's easy. Responsibility is the area where the litigation and the discretion.
So we got to hear from her. Let's get some response from her.
Okay.
Sure. So discretion is most often the enemy of the good. When you allow discretion to come in, you get that subjectivity that and this is just me talking. I'm not this is me wearing my equity hat, not my law hat.
Right.
When you allow discretion to come in, you allow what we've seen happen over and over and over. It's the same vendor that's used for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years without any real assessment of are they delivering what the city needs. And I want to change that. I want to change the practice of just going to the drawer, pulling out the guy or the vendor that did it the last time and saying, okay, you're it, because you did a good enough job. There has to be fresh opportunity. And then, of course, discretion, if we allow, every procurement officer to just use their discretion, I think we're not going to have change. We're going to see the same thing over and over. But in terms of a procurement advisor, I like that idea. It has to be the right person, someone who is willing to actually do the work, to make reasonable decisions, and to not be a hindrance to the process, but a boon to the process. So it's going to take the right person. And I can talk more about what I think that is later. Yeah. But I like the idea. I know that Comptroller Henry would probably be very open to that. And I think that's where that person would reside. I think that's where that position would reside. I know that, I've heard you, I've watched you for 3, 4 years now, maybe a little bit longer. I know that the lowest bidder qualification or criteria is one that rankles. And, I've watched it, I did bid opening for 3 years, and, this is just something that I would do. I would actually, make a side list of who was the lowest on this one, and then who's the lowest on that one. And I often wondered, what kind of, I don't want to say game, but there's some game theory that gets applied to the bids. I think I've never submitted a bid. I don't know, but what I was seeing, I was looking for patterns that would suggest and support.
I got a pattern for you. The same companies keep getting the contracts. The same big boys seem to keep getting the contracts, and the little guys, little ladies, the little gals don't.
So some of what I've seen, and this is one of the last issues that I took on that is still an open issue, is within the agency, as the RFPs are drafted, the contract requirements sometimes require materials that are very, very expensive, and they specify that this material is used, and that raises the cost of the contract, which means that if you can't buy that product in bulk or in a mass amount, as a small company, you're buying it, arguably quote of off the shelf. You're not buying it in mass because you don't know how many more contracts you're going to get. So you necessarily are paying more for that product, for that contract, than a larger company that can buy it in bulk because they know that they're going to have a number of number of contracts that they can spread that cost against. Anyway, I am not the expert.
I mean, you're right.
The shield is, but that's one factor. And there's one incident that I'm aware of where an RFP was written for a specific product that only one vendor could supply. That's wrong.
It also interrupted people keeping it over and over. Let me get my question in. I never got an answer. Make Baltimore more business friendly. I've always had the impression that we chase away businesses, we're finding businesses. I remember businesses on North Avenue getting fined for trash that was outside their door that was dumped from someone else. I mean, how do we balance that out? And then on equity, why is it Santan can be the first place, one of the first places the city wants to put a homeless shelter, but not Guilford?
Donnie, can I chime in just for a second? Because you hear this term business friendly. Business friendly doesn't mean you can do anything you want. Go ahead.
Mr. Shields, that's a question for Dana.
I know. That don't mean I'm not going to answer. Go ahead, Dana.
Okay. So really what I think the first thing that we can do really is what I said at the very beginning, is to pay vendors that we contract with. If we pay people like we say we're going to, that is about the best thing that we can do to boon and boost the relationship that we have. So that is always going to be number one for me. I will always lead with that. Secondarily, we need to have a one-stop shop for licenses and permits to make it easier to establish a business and to make it easier to understand what it takes to do business in Baltimore. That's second. Third, we charge a little bit here, a little bit here. There are a lot of points at which we charge companies to exist. That we need to think about, what we're doing. We impose a lot of fines. Are they reasonable? I don't want to get off mission for today, but the incident where the young man was stopped because he had something hanging off of his rearview mirror, and he was killed, it has me thinking more about the penalties that we impose, the way that we pull people up and interact in an aggressive way. I'd like to see us, stop a lot of the traffic stops that we do, because those are moments of engagement that across the country have led to incredibly sad outcomes, which has me thinking, are there engagements that the city has with businesses that we need to think about changing? We charge money for someone to hang out a sign in front of their business. What is the revenue that really is generated by that? And what are we achieving? I know that we're achieving, some consistency. We're generating revenue. We are, imposing some standards. But is that something that we can eliminate or can look at reducing?
How many businesses are we losing to Baltimore County?
Probably a lot. Probably a lot. Although I'm losing you, Donnie. I didn't.
How do we stop it? How do we stop our businesses? How do we retain what we have and attract more? People are leaving. Downtown, I went downtown Sunday evening. It was dead. It was like a cemetery.
Well, can I respond, Donnie, please? I've been quiet as long as I can, really. First of all, we can't panic because everything is cyclical. Yes, there's going to be times when you go downtown and there's not going to be anybody there, but there's going to be times when the population is overflowing and people are falling into the harbor. So every time we see something different. But let me go back to something that was said earlier, and I want to get to your business friendly thing too, because sometimes people think business friendly means leaving business unregulated and they can do anything they want with the population, and that's not appropriate either, in my opinion. But the question that former Mayor Pugh asked, that Dana referred to, about how can we break this down, I would have asked it a different way. Let's identify minority business that we can empower to do it as it is. See, we start with the assumption that minority businesses lack the capacity and the resource. That's not typically true. What is true is that they don't have the capital. If you give me enough capital, I can buy the services that I need. I can buy the expertise. I can buy the capability. But now, and you're also right, Donnie, that the low bid process rewards those who have accumulated the experience and the resources over years. And at the same time, we're trying to encourage new business to come in. I remember Robert Clay, who you all remember, many years ago, used to say to me, there was a company at one time called Joe Hawk Trucking. He used to be down in Cherry Hill. And Clay would say to me, he said, Bob, I got 12 trucks that I'm still paying for. How can I compete with Joe Hawk, who's got 300 trucks parked in his yard that he doesn't owe a dime on? How can I possibly compete? And the answer is you can't. You can't. That playing field will never be level for you unless the government does something to raise you up to the point where you can compete at the same. And that will never be the case if price is the determining factor.
Dana, you want to respond?
That will never be the case. Go ahead, Don. I'm sorry.
Dana?
Yeah, I mean, once again, Mr. DeShiel is right. There's the ability to compete. Often the race goes to the one that is the best funded. Because with funds, you can do a number of things. You can reduce your price. You can reduce your you can reduce your overhead, you can reduce your costs, you can suffer a little bit less because you've got more. With more, those that are more well-funded, they can lobby, which I tell people, don't lobby me. The one that lobbies me is the one that I'm going to ignore. But that's part of the process. A lot of people pay attention to that. I don't. The better funded you are, you can suffer not being paid for a long time. So yeah, competition is fierce, but how do we look at it? I am open. I'm totally open to changing how we select vendors. I know that that's going to be part of what's looked at through the comprehensive rewrite of our procurement protocols. But I'm really looking at what can we do right now. That rewrite, it's going to happen, but it's not going to happen fast. We're not going to have any outcomes for probably a year. We can't wait a year. We have to wait a year to make change.
So, Mr. DeSteel, one thing you have often brought up on this show, and I'll take it what I think I have heard you said is that Black companies do not get mobilization costs, where white primes do. And that's upfront money to get a project going.
No, that's not something I've said because there is no distinction in terms of who can get mobilization. The provision for mobilization is included in the bidding document, and whoever bids on the contract will bid on each component of it, and which includes mobilization. However,
what did you say? How did that get on my mind? I know I associated it with you.
Well, I mean, I may have been complaining about a matter that came before the board about 3 weeks ago, where mobilization was the issue. It was a bid dispute where one company bid a mobilization amount that was more than twice the amount of the city's estimate for mobilization, and more than 3 times the amount of the contractor that I was representing. And one of the interesting things that came out of that discussion before the board was Comptroller Henry's question that he raised. He said, well, if I take into account the extra money that's being allowed to this bidder up front, and I deduct the cost of those funds to the city, that bidder is really the bid offered by that bidder is not the lowest. And he said it twice. And he was right. The city, for the purpose of determining low bid, it's not restricted to the number the contractor puts on a piece of paper. Those numbers are sometimes in error. There are always mathematical adjustments where you can if the math is wrong, then you correct the math. You don't just award because that's the number the contractor put on the bid. And
So
Comptroller Henry said, hey, when I do the math here, this firm that's being recommended is not the low bidder. And he said it twice, but the award was made in spite of that.
So is Mr. Haney right then?
Pardon?
Is Mr. Haney right? Mr. Haney? He said, do campaign contributions have anything with getting contracts?
Well, not directly, but they do have everything to do with getting access to the people who decide who's going to get the contracts. Maryland is one of the jurisdictions that has a pay-to-play law, and under that law, you have to report. If you're a government contractor, you have to file reports disclosing what contributions you've made to elected officials and others. And I assume that law is being complied with by every government contractor who's doing business with the city. So you're not going to find a situation where somebody says, "Here's a contribution, give me a contract." That's not the way it happens. The way it happens is access, the opportunity to explain and educate and lobby, if you will, the opportunity to tell your story is often one that is directly tied to the contributions that you give. And so if you don't have the chance to tell your story, then you don't get. Remember now, these 5 people that sit there every week, not one of them is an expert in everything they decide that comes before them, and you can't expect them to be. And also remember that when these issues are challenged, Donnie, bid protests, you file it by noon on Tuesday, and it's heard 9 o'clock the next morning.
Not a lot of time.
Who nobody's investigated that. There's no due process involved in that. So what are you going to get? Most of the time, the decisions are going to be consistent with whatever the agency has recommended. That's why I think we need the procurement advisor who can get in there and get to the bottom of the situation and find out. Go ahead, Dan.
But let me just tell you what happened, at least during the time that I was city solicitor and deputy. We knew what the controversial procurements would be. We would be advised by the attorneys from the contracts practice group, and they would say, here's the history on this. They would give us the documents, they would give us the file, and I would read it and understand the history and how we got where we got. And so would, Judge Davis when he was a city solicitor. So we would be prepared. And then sure enough, you would get the protest, and there would be no surprise that a protest was filed. And then a whole, fresh group of attorneys would look at the protest, spend the day looking at it, making, analyzing it and making recommendations. Now, I've always done my own work. I've always done my own law work because I didn't want to roll up to a meeting and be, reaching out for something and it's not there and I don't know what to do. Right. So I actually spend a lot of time getting ready for the more controversial procurements, and that often translated into the ones with big dollars and the ones where we knew that there was competition in the procurement process. Often, and this is just a little detail, when we would reject a bidder out for whatever reason, we would often know that this was something that we would hear about later, and so you hold on to that information. The law department would do a lot of work, and there were very few surprises. Just want to put that out there so that although, you would get a protest, it would be filed by X date or X hour, and then it would be heard the next day, just as the protester has done its work to prepare that protest and submit it, those in the law department were prepared to defend it or respond to it. The work was done well in advance. But other than that, you're right. The 5 members of the Board of Estimates, not one of us would be a full expert on everything that came before us.
Okay, so we gotta touch this since you're both attorneys. Yesterday, Derek Chauvin was found guilty on all counts. What does that mean to you, Chief Equity Officer for Baltimore City, Dana P. Moore, Esquire?
So for me, it means I can breathe a little bit. I
thought they were going to burn this joint down if they didn't get that verdict right.
So I will tell you, just by way of background, the city was prepared for the reaction of that would follow from a not guilty verdict. Just on a very personal level, you guys know I have a granddaughter who is very, very special to me. She was at softball practice, and I called her mother, and Ralph and I were prepared to go get her and pull her off the field if there was a not guilty verdict. And her mother agreed, go get her. So we were ready to go if there was a not guilty verdict. We did not want that child out because we believed that there would be a quick and very dramatic response if there was a not guilty verdict. We were pleased that there were not just one guilty verdict, but 3. And what that means, well, on the positive side, it means that this group of jurors saw what we saw. They saw what we all saw, was the murder of George Floyd right before our very eyes, and that it was unimpeachable evidence of that. That's on the positive side. On the negative side, for me, I'm asking, look at all the cases that came before it. There was also unimpeachable evidence, but there wasn't the video record. There wasn't, the police department coming in and testifying against the accused. What it says to me, America, it's just like, Bob, you were raised with this. So were you, Donnie. You can't just be a lawyer. You got to be the best lawyer. You're Black. You have to be better than. You have to be more than. You can only, all your friends, they can make a mistake. Girl, you can't make any mistakes. And what it says to me is you had to have super evidence, ultra evidence of this crime in order for there to be a conviction. We were lucky, we had that. But that's the one thing that's sticking in my head, that yet again, we have to be more than. We have to do more in order to get what justice has required, and we did that this case, and I'm hoping
Dana,
that.
could you believe Could you believe they went after Maxine Waters? Could you believe these people in Congress? They attempted to silence her and censor her.
On a very local level, I am seeing on social media some of my, very dear Caucasian friends saying Auntie Maxine needs to be quiet, and I'm telling you, no, she doesn't. Until you have been Black and you have walked every day of your life being maligned and targeted and subject to some of the cruelest, most unkind thoughts and words and deeds, until you've been there, I don't think you get to tell somebody who has been there to be quiet.
How to feel.
How to feel?
Yeah,
Let me defer
Donnie,
to Bob.
I agree. Donnie, Lethal Weapon, the first Lethal Weapon was released in 1987. In the movie Lethal Weapon, there was a scene where a house blew up, and Murtaugh, Danny Glover, and Riggs, Mel Gibson, were questioning some kids about whether they saw anything. Murtaugh ended up talking to one of the young Black kids. So the little boy said to Murtaugh, when Murtaugh asked him if had he seen anything, the little boy, this is in 1987 now, the little boy's response was, "My mama told me the police kill Black people." That was in 1987. That was in 1987. Okay. To me, the most, I thought when I saw the video, I thought Chauvin was guilty. That was, but the more pressing issue for Baltimore City is how do you get enough young people to want to be police officers? How do you get enough young Black people in particular to want to be police officers? That they're undermanned, according to what Commissioner Harrison said just yesterday, as I recall reading somewhere.
That's not news.
That's not news. But what we need to do is make being a police officer an honorable profession again. Okay.
Well, the first thing they ought to do is celebrate.
And the outcome in that case helps to do that, which is how you help to encourage young Black people to want to become police officers. And that starts from the ground up. What happened to the PALs? What happened to police athletic leagues? What happened to those things that encourage? And you got to look at. I remember talking to Senator Sidnor a few weeks ago when the Maryland Senate was reviewing all of these police reform bills, including the one that repealed the Law Enforcement Officers' Bill of Rights. I said, did either one of those bills address the issue of eligibility to get into the academy? Did any one of those? He said no. I said, well, you did a great job. I applaud what you did, but you missed the mark. The way that you stop police brutality is you change the people who are making the decisions. Okay, you will not train away white supremacy. There's not enough diversity classes to cover that. Okay. We've got to put the right people in the right positions. We've got to encourage people who understand what the problem is in the position to make the decisions on what's going to be done to solve the problem. That's the disconnect that we have.
So one of the things that we've talked about, we meet every couple of weeks. It's called Police Stat, and we look at all sorts of stats to policing. And we have talked about recruitment and retention. And, again, this word, judgment call and discretion. And I've asked who holds the discretion?
Yes.
To make these decisions. Who holds the discretion?
Who decides? Who decides?
Who decides? I haven't even got to what are you deciding? I'm asking who decides? Because that's right. Where it happens.
Exactly right.
That's where it happens.
Right.
Well, I got to pose this to you. Baltimore City Public Schools, the board there are a lot of people. Mr. Shields, I'm pulling on you again. You often talk about Black people who are in position who are white supremacists. That's what you said. I wonder about some of these decisions when it comes to Baltimore City Public Schools. For instance, in Sandtown, we have not 3, not 2, we now have 1 elementary school. And as you well know, you kill a school, you kill a community. But these are Black people on the board. And not only have we lost schools, names like William Penderhughes and George Kelson, names have been taken off of school, names of famous Black people, never to be remembered.
That's harsh. Donnie, I want to talk to you about the Archdiocese of Baltimore and the school that's coming on MLK Boulevard, the Mother Lang School. It'll be in West Baltimore. We should talk about that. That does not address, what you've just raised. I have not
What
heard.
I'm saying is, you have people on the school board, Dana, who I'm not sure they even visit the communities. They make decisions from ivory towers, from a satellite. Oh, there are not enough people here, so we got to close the school. Do they forget that Sandtown is where Freddie Gray happened, which put Baltimore on the international news scene? And it's like, what is our response since 2015? Dana, the only thing new in Sandtown since Freddie Gray is a renovated Western District Police Station. How's that for equity?
I would say that that's not equity. I can't give you any different. That's not equity.
Donna, we try to automate the thinking process, and that becomes, some. I used to say, we tend to, in order to avoid the discretion, we tend to establish a labyrinth, an algorithm of things, and we push a button and we see where it comes out, and whatever it is, it is. That, and what I'm trying to say is that there are a number of factors that legitimately would indicate whether or not this building is still serving its highest and best use as a school building. That there are legitimate factors. If you've got a building that was designed to accommodate 1,000 students and there's only 200 there, that's a legitimate issue. I don't
sure.
But our problem is the priority of issues. What's most important? Though we get caught up in the weeds too often. We cut the grass thinking we're killing the weeds, but you don't kill weeds unless you uproot them. And so oftentimes, Donnie, we have people, and I was shocked to hear a so-called expert say this on a news channel yesterday. Did you know that the concept that oppression can be transmitted through our DNA? That if we are an oppressed people, according to an expert, that level of oppression can be so ingrained that it's actually transferred from one generation to the next in our genes.
So is liberation. So is liberation. So are freedom fighters. That's in your DNA, Mr. Bob. It's in my DNA. I am a fighter. I will not quit.
Yeah, but that's not because of the shade of your skin. That's what I'm getting at. That's not. In other words, you started off saying we've got Black people heading the school system. What you should have said is that we've got people that look like you and me, heading the system, but that doesn't mean they're actually like you and me heading the school system. There's a difference, and I'm gonna leave it at that.
So one of the things that I've questioned is the data. We make a lot of data-driven decisions, but we need to look at how are we collecting data? What data are we collecting? Are we doing comprehensive requests for information? I think where both of you are going is, the example of a building that holds 1,000 people, but there are 200 students. Well, what is the impact on those 200 students of having that school in that place? And what is the impact of that school and that level of education on not just the kids, but their families? You can't stop at just the size of the building and the number of its occupants. What's being delivered and what is the impact of that? I think those are the questions that need to be asked.
Yes.
But also,
so we have a chief.
These are the same neighborhoods that make it on the 6 o'clock news every night. There's a correlation when you close a school, quite likely tonight, Sandtown is going to be on the news for something horrible. And we see it every day, 6 o'clock, 11 o'clock, the murders. In the same neighborhoods, no schools. Plenty of vacants. Absentee landlords. It all happens in the same spot.
I totally agree with you. And when years and years ago, when I was trying the Thompson versus HUD case, and we had an argument that, there's a lot going on in Baltimore that's bad, and none of our neighbors are helping us. And then they started talking about population decline, and the question for me was, well, why would somebody come to Baltimore? We have the worst schools. We have the worst transportation. This is back then. We have the worst streets. We have the worst trash collection. We've got the worst crime. We have the prisons. We have, so many returning citizens. We have the worst jobs. Why are all these challenges concentrated in Baltimore? And I do think some of that gets back to redlining, but here's the thing. It's 2021.
Yeah.
I personally think that we have sun, moon, stars aligning. We have mayor and city administrator leadership that are hyper-focused on changing things. We have the mandate to do so. And here's the thing, and we need to come back and talk about it. And that's the American Rescue Plan that is going to bring many, many, many millions of dollars right here into Baltimore City. And there is a commitment that that money will be spent equitably. What does that mean? I don't know, because I don't know what decisions are going to be made about how that money is spent. But we need everyone's voice to be heard about what you feel the priorities should be. And the mayor is asking for that. And I'm asking for that because where
the money is historically gone is in the White L, from Johns Hopkins University down to the Harvard and over again. It never reaches the butterfly, black butterfly.
Let me just say this, with every breath I have in these lungs, and with every little brain cell that I have, and with every big mouth that I have, and with every mandate that I had is to be creative and to go ahead and upset people, I will speak out. If that is where the money lands, you will hear, and I will not be alone. I will not be the only one speaking. When we do recycle stat, we look at how or trash stat, I forget what we actually call it. But when we look at how is trash collected, in the city, we can see that there's a difference on the west side. And, one of our stakeholders, when we pointed it out week after week after week, and I said, well, how long has this been happening? Oh, it's been like this for years. And I'm like, why? Why?
Well, I won't put it all on.
It's a problem. And let me finish, Donnie. And so I asked the why question. And the response is, well, it's not intentional and it's not my fault. I'm like, oh, brother, we're not here to find intent. We're not here to lay fault. We're here to make changes. And now we have data that tells us that a change is needed. So let's get busy making the change. Intent and fault, that's for a courtroom. We're in this room together. We're looking at things from an equitable lens. We know we have a problem, so let's address it and let's change it. So
I have one suggestion, and it's an easy fix. And thank you for your time. We're at 10:59, but I have an easy fix, and you've got to share this with the mayor. He represents Park Heights, right?
Yeah, he represents the whole city.
Well, I mean, but from a community.
Yeah. No worries. Yeah.
Okay, and the Preakness is going to happen this year, right?
Yes.
So hear me out on this. Year after year, when the Preakness comes, those Caribbean eateries surrounding the racetrack get dismissed. They get pigeonholed. They don't make money. And these are the same businesses that hold down that community all throughout the year. So it is my prayer that the Caribbean eateries around Pimlico make a lot of money, get treated fairly, because they have been, the treatment of them has not been equitable ever.
All right, so can I follow up with you on that? Because I want to know, I know we're out of time, and I don't want to take Jay Wendell Gordon's time.
Where is he?
I don't know. I thought you said he was on.
He was supposed to be on there. He's in court. No. That was 10:30.
Oh.
No. This is your
okay.
time.
Then let's.
We're not letting you.
Okay, so I want to follow up with you. I don't know. Stop it, Bob. Stop.
All right.
I don't know. I don't know that issue, but I want to know the issue on the Caribbean eateries. Like, how are they being frosted out? And is there a way to lift them up, get them like within, inside Pimlico?
They should be on the inside. They should be the primary beneficiaries of anything at the Preakness. And
I'm open to that.
speaking.
Yeah. So
I mean, we need Baltimore's best Caribbean dish contest.
I like it. So
we can't forget those people that hold it down. That's equity.
That is equity. That's exactly right. It's not, we don't want it to be equal. We want it to be equitable. And I'll come back and talk about that, if you'll have me, because this is fun. I just want my brother Bob on my right side, because when you start jumping down my throat, he kind of jumps in and helps me out. I appreciate it.
He the one with the razor blades. You better watch him. He's the Puerto Rican.
I know. I've seen him in action.
That's profiling, Donnie. You know that, right?
Ooh.
My granddad is from Puerto Rico.
Okay. All right.
So my grandfather is from St. Croix, and he was. That's a whole nother story. But I don't know what keeps going on with my camera. I don't know. But
Good
the
deal.
lighting.
Well,
anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Attorney DeShields. And we'll be back later this evening at 7 p.m. with Black Lawyers Roundtable with Attorney Keisha Brown. Have a beautiful day, everyone. And thank you.
See ya. Bye-bye. See you, Dana.